Elena Vale knew the Alpha King's wolf was faking before she even touched him. Real pain did not arrange itself in the sunniest patch of the training yard, stretch one tragic paw toward the sky, and peek through one amber eye to check whether the healer was impressed. The wolf in question was enormous, silver gray, and magnificent in the way storms were magnificent when viewed from a safe window. Around him stood guards, officers, two royal healers who looked deeply offended by their own uselessness, and Lord Marcus Vane, the king's beta, whose tired expression suggested he had seen the world end several times before breakfast. Half an hour earlier, Elena had been in her little clinic, tying a splint around the leg of a sheepdog named Bramble. Bramble had chased a cartwheel, lost the argument, and accepted treatment with the grave dignity of a dog who believed broken bones were a personal insult. That had been real pain. Then a royal guard had burst through her door and announced that the Alpha King's wolf had collapsed in the training yard. The royal healers could not approach him without being growled at, so Marcus had sent for someone accustomed to large, difficult animals. Elena had called it the rudest compliment she had ever received. Now she stood in Greyhaven's crowded training yard, looking at the largest false emergency of her career. Marcus turned when she approached. His relief was so visible that it was almost another diagnosis. "Healer Vale, thank you for coming," the beta said. Elena kept her eyes on the wolf. "How long has His Majesty been arranged like this?" Marcus looked at the tragic paw, the flattering angle of the head, and the ear tilted toward Elena's footsteps. "Since someone mentioned you were being sent for." A few guards suddenly found the far wall fascinating. Elena crouched beside him. The ear twitched. Her eyes narrowed. Elena set her satchel on the ground. She reached for the supposedly injured hind leg. The moment her fingers touched fur, she felt the truth the way she always did. Not as words, but as warmth, pressure, and absence. No break. No torn ligament. No swelling. No injury at all. Under her palm, the wolf's pulse picked up. Not with distress, with satisfaction. Elena leaned closer and saw one amber eye open the width of a needle. The eye snapped shut. She sat back on her heels. "Lord Marcus," Elena said, keeping her voice calm, "your king is not injured." The beta closed his eyes for one long second. "I suspected." The wolf gave the smallest possible whine. It was an excellent whine. It had texture, timing, and a tiny lift at the end that suggested noble suffering bravely endured. Several guards shifted, visibly moved despite themselves. Elena was not moved. "That was impressive," she said to the wolf, "but still false." The wolf's tail moved once in the dust before he remembered he was supposed to be unconscious. Marcus pinched the bridge of his nose. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, with the formal despair of a man addressing both a sovereign and an idiot, "please get up." The wolf opened both eyes. For one suspended moment he stared at Elena with the bright, direct attention of an animal that had achieved its goal and wanted credit for strategy. Then the shift began. Elena stood and turned her back at once. She had treated enough shifters after accidents to know the practical problem of clothing and fur. Behind her came the rush of power folding back into human shape, and the frantic rustle of fabric as Marcus, clearly prepared, swung a dark cloak from his arm. When Marcus cleared his throat, Elena turned. Alpha King Cassian Thorne stood in the middle of the training yard wrapped in a cloak, black hair disheveled, jaw set in a line so severe it might have been carved by a very angry sculptor. His eyes were the same amber as the wolf's, though now they were guarded, controlled, and deeply embarrassed. The crowd went silent. Cassian looked at Elena as if she were a battlefield he had not meant to enter. "Healer Vale," he said. His voice was low, precise, and almost steady. "I apologize for the disturbance." The words were kingly. The cloak was not. Elena lowered her gaze only enough to be polite. "Your wolf is physically sound, Your Majesty." I am aware. Marcus made a small sound beside him that might have been a cough and might have been a prayer for patience. Elena glanced at the abandoned scraps of black silk on the stone steps of the portico. The king's clothes had not survived the shift. They never did. Does this happen often? She asked. Cassian's expression sharpened. No, Marcus said nothing with remarkable volume. Elena looked from the silent Beta to the king. Often enough, she corrected. Cassian's ears went faintly red. It was subtle, but Elena spent her life watching for subtle things. A lame horse would tell the truth with one tight muscle beside the shoulder. A frightened hawk would tell it with a third blink. A king, apparently, told it with his ears. It has occurred, Cassian said, more than once. Elena nodded. Then my professional assessment is simple. The officers leaned in to spite themselves. Your Majesty's wolf wants attention. The silence after that was large enough to stable horses in. One of the younger guards made a strangled sound and turned it into a cough badly. Cassian stared at her. Elena fastened her satchel. He is not sick. He is not lame. He is not fainting. He is staging emergencies because they bring someone running. The king's mouth opened, then closed. Marcus looked as if he had just watched justice arrive wearing muddy boots. That will be all, Cassian said to the yard, without taking his eyes off Elena. The training yard emptied with impressive speed. Royal guards were excellent at obedience when embarrassment belonged to someone else. Only Marcus stayed, because betas were apparently not allowed mercy. Cassian stepped closer. The cloak shifted, and he caught it with one hand, dignity surviving by a thread. Healer Vale, the king said, more quietly. I have perfect control over my wolf. Elena looked at the torn silk on the steps again. Historically? His jaw flexed. Until recently. Recently meaning? Marcus answered before the king could. 3 weeks. Cassian shot him a look. Marcus looked back with the calm of a man who had packed spare cloaks for 3 weeks and was no longer afraid of death. Elena considered this. What changed 3 weeks ago? The king's eyes held hers. For a breath, there was no courtyard, no guards pretending not to listen from behind pillars, no torn clothing, no ridiculous false collapse. There was only the clear amber gaze of a man who was trying very hard not to know the answer. Marcus sighed. 3 weeks ago, the beta said, you treated the royal falcon's wing in the West Mews. Elena remembered. A peregrine with a torn flight feather and a temper like a duchess denied tea. The bird had bitten her twice and then refused to leave her shoulder for an hour. She had seen the Alpha King across the courtyard that day, standing with 3 officers near the archway. He had looked at her once, then looked away as if the sight required strategy. Ah, she said. Cassian's expression grew colder, which Elena was beginning to understand meant less controlled, not more. My wolf noticed you, he said. That was not a confession anyone had prepared him to make. She heard the roughness under the words. Not desire, exactly. Not yet, but discomfort at being seen by some part of himself he had spent years commanding into silence. Elena softened her voice. Elena softened her answer by reminding him that wolves noticed many things. Cassian did not look comforted. His wolf, he said, was making a spectacle of it. There was no kind way to lie about that, so Elena simply agreed. Marcus made another sound, this time unmistakably amused. Cassian ignored him. Can you stop it? Elena looked at him for a long moment. This was the part people always wanted from healers. Stop the limp. Stop the fever. Stop the crying. Stop the animal from biting. Stop the body from saying what the mind found inconvenient. Sometimes stopping was the wrong goal. I can examine the pattern, she said carefully. I cannot promise to silence a wolf. I am not asking you to silence him. The answer came too quickly. Elena noticed. So did Marcus. Cassian looked briefly furious with himself. Elena saved him, because wounded pride often snapped if handled too roughly. Then I will need to see him again if the behavior continues. At that exact moment, somewhere inside the king's composed face, his wolf must have heard victory. Cassian's eyes flashed gold for less than a heartbeat. Marcus saw it. Elena saw it. Cassian knew they saw it. It will not continue, the king said. It continued the next morning. Elena was mixing a poultice for a mare with a bruised tendon when Marcus appeared in her clinic doorway, carrying a folded cloak over one arm, and the expression of a man whose faith in institutions had been badly damaged. "Healer Vale," Marcus said. Elena did not look up. "Is he limping again?" "Coughing." She paused. Behind Marcus, two stable hands slowed to listen. "Coughing," Elena repeated. "In wolf form. Loudly. In the armory." Elena set down the pestle. The armory was an unusual place to develop a respiratory ailment, and Marcus's expression made it clear that he had already mentioned that to the patient. Elena wiped her hands on a cloth. "And the royal healer?" "His Majesty growled at him." "Of course he did." Marcus gave the smallest bow. "Shall we?" The Alpha King's wolf had chosen an excellent stage for his illness. The armory was long, vaulted, and full of polished steel. Every cough echoed like a funeral drum. Elena found him seated between two racks of ceremonial spears, huge silver head lowered, amber eyes sorrowful. When he saw her, he produced a deep, rattling cough that would have convinced a roomful of anxious grandmothers and no one else. Several weapons masters stood nearby, pretending not to be fascinated. Elena approached slowly. The wolf coughed again. "That sounds terrible," she said. The wolf blinked with grave agreement. "I should listen to his chest," Elena told Marcus. Marcus held out the cloak in readiness. "Naturally." Elena knelt. She placed both hands against the wolf's ribs. The cough stopped at once. His lungs were clear. His breath was even. His heart was strong, if embarrassingly fast. Beneath her palms she felt a hum of restless energy, bright and pleased and utterly shameless. She leaned closer to the wolf's ear. "You are a terrible patient." The enormous tail swept once across the stone floor and knocked over a small rack of practice daggers. Everyone jumped. Elena did not. "He is fine," she said. The wolf shifted before she could stand, which meant Elena had to turn fast and Marcus had to move faster. By the time she faced them again, Cassian stood in human form with the cloak around his shoulders and one dagger rack lying dramatically on its side. "This," the king said, in a voice of intense control, "is becoming inconvenient." Elena looked at the fallen daggers. "For the furniture, certainly." The weapons master made a choking sound and left the room. Cassian's mouth twitched. It was gone almost immediately, but Elena saw it. A crack in winter ice. A sign that beneath all the discipline was not only loneliness and strain, but a sense of humor that had been starved and was startled to find food. She looked at him more carefully. The morning light caught the planes of his face, the dark stubble at his jaw, the shadows under his eyes. His body was powerful, yes. His presence filled the room without trying. But he looked tired in a way animals look tired after standing too long with pain they had been trained to hide. "Your Majesty," Elena said, "I would like to ask you something without an audience." Marcus made a small approving noise and began directing everyone out before the king answered. When the armory was empty, Cassian drew the cloak tighter with the same grave dignity another man might bring to signing a treaty. "Ask. When your wolf shifts without permission, what do you feel first?" His expression became still. Elena waited. Waiting was half of healing. Animals, men, kings, all of them said more if you did not rush to fill the silence. "Pressure," Cassian said at last. "Heat under the skin. A pull in the bones. Fear? His eyes sharpened. No. She let the lie sit between them until it grew uncomfortable. His jaw tightened. Sometimes. Of what? Cassian looked toward the high windows where the pale sky showed through iron bars. After a long silence, Cassian admitted that he feared failing to hold his wolf. Elena let the answer settle before asking the more important question. Why must he be held? The king turned back to her. This time there was something dangerous in his face, but it was not directed at her. It belonged to an old memory. Because an alpha king who cannot command his own wolf cannot command a kingdom. Elena had heard that kind of sentence before. Men who did not listen to animals often confused obedience with health. Who taught you that? Cassian's mouth became a hard line. My father. There it was. The old injury under the new symptom. Elena nodded once. Then your father may have been a very powerful man, she said, but he was not a very good healer. Cassian stared at her. No one, she suspected, spoke of the late Alpha King that way. Your wolf is not sick, she said, but there is strain between you. If you want the public incidents to stop, we need to treat the strain, not punish the symptom. Treat. The king sounded as if the word had walked into the room without papers. Yes. How? Elena had no official answer. She was an animal healer. She knew tendons, fevers, wing bones, foaling, salves, breath, fear, and trust. But the moment she looked back at Cassian, she knew the shape of the work, even if she did not yet know the name. Morning and evening sessions, she said. Breathing regulation, touch assessment, a liniment to reduce muscular tension, observation of shift response. Marcus, outside the door but clearly listening, made a strangled sound. Cassian's eyes narrowed. That sounds invented. Elena admitted, without sounding remotely apologetic, that most useful things had once been invented by someone. Cassian understood the shape of her plan at once. She was prescribing herself. No, she told him. She was prescribing consistency. The king studied her, and Elena felt the full force of his attention. Not the wolf's eager focus, but the man's. It was steady, intelligent, and too intense to be comfortable. He knew she was building a bridge out of words. He also knew he wanted to cross it. Very well, Cassian said. The golden flicker appeared again at the edge of his eyes. Elena pointed one finger at him. No celebrating by shifting. The flicker vanished. For the first time, Alpha King Cassian Thorne smiled. It was small. It was brief. It made him look younger and much more dangerous to Elena's peace of mind. I will do my best, he said. That afternoon, Marcus delivered a formal notice to Elena's clinic. By order of the Crown, healer Elena Vale was appointed temporary specialist consultant in matters concerning royal wolf bond stability. Her access to the West Wing was approved, and she was to report to the private garden at dawn and the king's lower study at sunset. Elena read the notice twice, then looked at Marcus. Temporary specialist consultant? Marcus's tired eyes did not move. He rejected 4 shorter titles. You counted? I count many things now. The next morning, she arrived at the private garden with a bottle of horse liniment, a roll of clean linen, and the certainty that her life had become stranger than was reasonable. Cassian stood beneath a black pine tree in a simple white shirt and dark trousers. No crown. No armor. No cloak, which Elena understood was either trust or optimism. The garden was enclosed by high stone walls and full of frost-edged herbs, bare rose canes, and a small fountain sealed with ice. He looked less like a symbol there. Still powerful, still beautiful in that severe northern way, but less armored by expectation. Good morning, Healer Vale, he said. Good morning, Your Majesty. Any false symptoms before breakfast? His mouth tightened as if fighting itself. 1. Elena stopped beside the stone table where she planned to arrange her supplies. Cassian confessed that his wolf had developed a limp the moment he smelled the liniment being carried through the hallway. No one had believed him. Elena considered that progress. Cassian looked almost offended. I did not shift. Then, significant progress. He accepted the correction with a grave nod, and Elena had to look down at her satchel to hide the smile. The first treatment was awkward in the way all honest beginnings were awkward. Elena rolled up his sleeve and applied the liniment to his forearm, wrist, and hand, not because the muscles required it, but because touch told her things words would not. Cassian held himself too still. His breath moved with soldierly discipline. His pulse leapt under her fingertips every time she touched the inside of his wrist. There was strain in him, but not damage. The same truth as the wolf. Nothing broken, only held too tightly for too long. You do this with horses? He asked. With any creature that believes stillness is the same as strength. His eyes dropped to her face. The garden seemed very quiet. Elena continued working the liniment into his skin. A horse with pain in one leg will tighten the opposite shoulder, she said, because practical explanation was safer than silence. If you only treat the leg, the horse keeps hurting. You have to follow the compensation. And what am I compensating for? She looked at his hand in hers. It was warm, calloused in places, not the soft hand of a decorative king. A lifetime of being told your wolf is a threat. His fingers flexed once. Careful, Healer Vale. The warning was quiet, but it had no teeth. Elena looked up. I am. He held her gaze, and for one moment his eyes turned fully amber. Not with danger, with something closer to relief. Then he looked away first. He complained that the liniment smelled terrible. Elena reminded him that it worked. When he pointed out that it worked on horses, she added that it also worked on kings pretending not to have feelings. That time the smile escaped him completely. The sessions became the shape of her days. At dawn, she entered the private garden with liniment and bandages. At sunset, she came to the lower study, where Cassian worked late over maps and border reports. Elena learned that he drank his tea without honey unless he was tired, hated ceremonial collars, and had secretly read 3 books on animal healing after their second session. She also learned that the wolf had not stopped being ridiculous. Once, when she crossed the training yard with clean bandages, the silver wolf appeared from behind a pillar and sneezed with the force of a collapsing roof. Marcus, without looking up from a report, said, "No." Another time, the wolf stepped on a harmless pine needle, lifted his paw, and stared at Elena with tragic accusation. "That is a twig," Elena said. The paw trembled. "Fine." She removed it. The wolf immediately leaned his massive head against her shoulder and rumbled with satisfaction. When Cassian shifted back, his face was red enough that the cold could not be blamed. "I apologize." "He is improving," Elena said. Cassian looked at the twig. "He is not. He chose a real object this time." The castle noticed, of course. Castles always noticed. Servants carried gossip faster than official messengers. Guards developed sudden reasons to pass the West Garden at dawn. The kitchen sent better tea to Elena's clinic. The stable boys began asking her whether the king's wolf had any appointments that week, and then running away laughing. Not everyone found it charming. The first sign came from Lady Seraphine Alder, niece to a council elder and owner of a voice so smooth it could polish marble. She stopped Elena outside the lower study one rainy evening and looked at the healer's satchel as if it were a stain on the carpet. Seraphine observed that Elena had become very necessary. Elena answered that the arrangement was temporary, but Seraphine's smile sharpened as she replied that a king's instability was always temporary when managed correctly. Before Elena could answer, Cassian opened the study door. He wore no crown, no formal coat, but the air still settled around him. "Lady Seraphine," he said, "if the council has questions, they may address them to me." Seraphine curtsied and left with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Inside the study, Cassian handed Elena tea and said, Seraphine dislikes anything she cannot categorize. A low-born animal healer treating the Alpha King's wolf must be a difficult category. You are not low-born in this room. The words landed too softly to defend against. Later, when the treatment ended, he caught her wrist gently. Cassian told her to come to him if the council pressured her. Elena did not soften at that. She reminded him, quietly but firmly, that she could answer questions herself. For a moment, he looked as if he wanted to argue. Then the bond between them steadied, and he understood what she was really asking for. Not rescue. Trust. Cassian studied her face, then nodded. Very well. It sounded like trust, and it frightened her more than Seraphine had. The real crisis began with a blanket. It was a royal training blanket, thick black wool embroidered with the thorn crest, used after cold weather wolf runs. Elena noticed it because the Alpha King's wolf refused to go near it. He did not pretend. He did not perform. He simply stopped at the edge of the training yard, hackles lifting, amber eyes fixed on the folded blanket in a groom's arms. Elena was there to check a cavalry mare's swollen hock. She turned at once. The silver wolf backed up, not dramatically, not for attention, real avoidance. Elena crossed the yard. Set that down, she told the groom. The groom looked toward Marcus. Marcus looked at the wolf, then at Elena. Set it down. The blanket touched the ground. The wolf growled. Every guard froze. Elena lifted one hand, palm low. The wolf's eyes flicked to her. His growl did not stop, but it changed. It became warning instead of threat. She crouched near the blanket, careful not to touch it at first. There was a smell beneath the wool. Faint, bitter, sharp as metal and crushed evergreen. Elena knew herbs well, but this was no ordinary stable scent. It made the skin between her shoulders tighten. Has this been washed recently? The groom nodded quickly. Yesterday, healer. With what? The usual soap, I swear. Elena took a cloth from her satchel and used it to lift one corner of the blanket. The smell sharpened. Behind her, the wolf snarled. Not at him, Elena murmured without looking away from the wool. At this. Marcus stepped closer. What is it? I don't know yet. But the wolf knew enough to avoid it. That afternoon, 2 more items reacted badly to the king's wolf. A leather training strap from the armory. A dark cloak delivered from the laundry. Each carried the same faint, bitter scent. Each made the wolf restless, then angry, then desperate to put distance between Cassian and the object. By evening, Cassian sat in the lower study with his sleeves rolled back and fury held so tightly in his body that Elena could almost see the seams. Poison? Marcus asked. Elena had arranged the 3 items on a side table, each isolated on clean linen. Not exactly. I don't think it was meant to kill him. It agitates the shift response. It irritates the bond between human and wolf. The more contact he has with it, the harder it becomes to stay balanced. Marcus went very still. Cassian's voice was quiet. Someone has been making it look as if I cannot control my wolf. Yes, Elena said. The word took the warmth from the room. For weeks, everyone had laughed at the wolf's fake illnesses. Elena had laughed too, carefully, kindly, because they had been funny. But beneath the humor, someone had been watching. Someone had noticed the pattern. Someone had chosen to turn an honest fracture into a political weapon. Cassian stood. His eyes flashed gold, then human, then gold again. Elena moved before Marcus did. She crossed the study and placed both hands against the sides of Cassian's face. He went completely still, not because she commanded him, because he trusted the touch. Breathe, she said. His hands came up slowly and closed around her wrists, not to remove them, to hold on. His voice was low when he understood the shape of the betrayal. Someone in his castle had been close enough to touch his clothing, his training gear, his wolf. Elena did not soften the truth. She confirmed it, because a clean wound healed better than a hidden one. His breath shuddered once. Elena. It was the first time he had used her name without title. Her own breath caught, but she kept her palm steady against his jaw. "Your wolf noticed before any of us," she said. "That is why he avoided the blanket. This is not loss of control. This is him protecting you." Cassian closed his eyes. Something in his face broke open for a second, grief and relief together. Elena understood then how deep the old wound went. He had spent years believing his wolf was the part of him that had to be mastered, and the whole time, the wolf had been trying to keep him alive. Marcus's voice came from behind them, very quiet. "The council meets tomorrow." Cassian opened his eyes. The gold remained, but it was steady now. "Then we let them meet." The council chamber of Greyhaven was designed to make ordinary people feel small. The ceiling was too high, the table was too long, and carved wolves looked down from the walls with stone eyes. 12 council members sat in a half circle, their robes dark as ravens. Elena stood beside Marcus near the lower end of the chamber. She wore her cleanest dress, plain blue wool, mended at the cuff. Her satchel rested at her feet. No one mistook her for nobility. That, she thought, was useful. Let them see exactly whom they were underestimating. Cassian sat at the head of the chamber, crowned in black iron, face unreadable. If he felt the residue of the poisoned cloak still working under his skin, he did not show it. He was still inclined to perform strength when truth would serve better. Elder Aldrin rose first. He was Seraphine's uncle, narrow-faced and silver-bearded, with eyes like cold pins. "Your Majesty," Aldrin began, "we gather out of concern for the stability of the crown. No one doubts your strength, but recent incidents have raised questions." Recent incidents. Such a tidy phrase for the Alpha King coughing in an armory and fainting fraudulently in a training yard. Elena kept her face still. Aldrin continued, "Your wolf has shifted without command repeatedly. These episodes began after Healer Vale entered your service. The council must ask whether her methods have worsened the condition they claim to treat." There it was. Seraphine sat 2 chairs to Aldrin's right, hands folded, expression composed. Another council member, Lady Morcant, leaned forward and spoke of unexplained gifts, dangerous influence, and disorder. Which was the word she did not say. Elena felt the room waiting for her to shrink. Cassian's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. Elena spoke before he could. "Your Majesty, may I answer?" His eyes found hers. He understood. She had asked him to let her answer. "You may," Cassian said. Elena stepped forward. Her voice did not need to be loud. The chamber carried sound beautifully, built as it was for men who liked hearing themselves. "The council is correct that His Majesty's wolf has shifted without command," she said. "The council is wrong about the cause." Aldrin's brows lifted. Elena picked up her satchel and removed 3 sealed cloth bundles. Yesterday, the Alpha King's wolf refused contact with a training blanket, a leather strap, and a cloak. Each item carried traces of the same herbal compound. It irritates the bond between shifter and wolf. It does not kill. It destabilizes. The council stirred. "A convenient claim," Aldrin said. "Yes," Elena said, "which is why I brought witnesses." The chamber doors opened. Marcus had arranged the entrance with more theater than Elena expected from him. First came the royal stablemaster leading a black warhorse named Valor, who entered with offended dignity and fixed one dark eye on Aldrin. Behind him came Pike, an old scarred hunting hound with a nose that could track a snow hare across stone. Finally came the Alpha King's wolf. Cassian had shifted outside the chamber by choice. He entered as the Silver Wolf, enormous and silent, padding beside Marcus. The council members went still. No one laughed now. No one thought of fake limps or theatrical coughs. The wolf who walked into that chamber was not a joke, not a symptom, not a weakness. He came to Elena's side and sat, not in front of her, not behind her, beside her. The message moved through the room without words. Elena opened the first bundle. The bitter smell rose faintly. Valor's ears pinned flat. Pike gave one sharp bark and backed away. The silver wolf's lips lifted from his teeth. Elena closed the bundle. All 3 animals reject the substance, she said. His Majesty's wolf reacted first, because the attack was designed for him. Lady Morcant looked unsettled. Animals may be trained. Yes, Elena said. Badly, usually. Marcus looked at the ceiling. Elena opened the second bundle and placed the leather strap on the floor. Valor's nostrils flared. The horse stepped sideways, then forward, dragging the stablemaster 2 unwilling paces toward the council table. Valor, Elena said softly. The warhorse stopped. She approached him and placed her hand against his neck. The images were not words. They rarely were. A smell, a corridor, a gloved hand. A silver ring worked into the shape of a serpent. Elena turned toward the council. Seraphine's hands were still folded. On one finger, half hidden beneath her sleeve, silver caught the torchlight. Elena did not accuse her yet. She looked at Pike. Bring him the cloak, she told Marcus. The third bundle opened. Pike sniffed once, sneezed in disgust, then trotted straight across the chamber. He did not go to Seraphine. He went to Aldrin. The old hound sat at the elder's feet and barked. Aldrin jerked back. This is absurd. The silver wolf rose. No one breathed. Elena felt the truth settle into place. Seraphine's ring had touched the strap. Aldrin had handled the cloak. One had planted. The other had directed. The compound was on Elder Aldrin's cuffs yesterday, Elena said. Pike can smell it now. You cannot base treason on a dog's nose, Aldrin snapped. The wolf growled. It shook dust from the carved ceiling. Elena lifted one hand, and the wolf fell silent. That silence did more damage than the growl. Everyone saw it. What Aldrin had called corruption looked, in that moment, like trust. Marcus stepped forward with a folded paper. The Royal Guard searched Elder Aldrin's private rooms this morning by order of the Alpha King, he said. We found dried thornbane, powdered silverleaf, and correspondence with Lord Harrow of the Eastern Border. The letters discuss a necessary weakening of royal authority before a council motion. Aldrin's face went gray. Seraphine stood too quickly. My uncle is old. He may have been misled. Valor snorted with such violent contempt that one council member flinched. Elena looked at Seraphine's ring. Your ring touched the strap, she said. Seraphine froze. The horse remembers the scent of your hand. For a moment, the noblewoman looked at the horse as if she might argue with him. Valor showed his teeth. She reconsidered. The chamber erupted. Aldrin denied, then blamed, then demanded procedure. Seraphine tried to sit down and found Pike still staring at her with the moral certainty of an old hound who had seen better liars. Marcus gave 2 guards a look. They moved with efficient calm. Through it all, Elena stood with the silver wolf beside her, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder. When the guards took Aldrin and Seraphine from the room, the noise faded into a stunned silence. The wolf turned his head toward Elena. His amber eyes were steady. Then he shifted. Elena turned her back again because some practical habits survived even triumph. Marcus provided the cloak. By the time she faced the chamber, Cassian stood human and crowned, cloak fastened properly, eyes clear. He did not return to the throne. He stood beside Elena. This council accused Healer Vale of weakening my wolf, Cassian said. His voice was quiet enough that every person leaned in to hear it. You were wrong. The words struck the chamber harder than a shout. She did not weaken my wolf. She was the first person in this kingdom who listened to him. Elena looked down at her hands because she did not trust her face. Cassian continued. Her skill identified an attack on the crown. Her courage exposed the traitors who attempted it. Her judgment prevented me from mistaking protection for instability. He turned slightly, and she felt the full room follow his gaze to her. From this day forward, Elena Vale serves as royal beast healer and wolf-bond consultant to the crown. Her authority in matters of animal testimony, shifter wolf distress, and royal stable health will be recognized by this council. Lady Morcant, pale but composed, bowed her head first. One by one, the others followed. Not all gladly. That was fine. Elena had never required enthusiasm from stubborn creatures. Compliance was often where healing began. Then Cassian did something no one expected. He took Elena's hand. Not hidden at his side, not quickly. He took it where the council could see, his fingers closing around hers with the steady certainty of a man finished pretending distance was safety. "And there is one more matter," he said. Elena's heart began doing something extremely unprofessional. Marcus looked suddenly interested in the far wall, which told Elena he knew exactly what was coming. Cassian looked at her, not the council. My wolf recognized her before I had the courage to understand why. I will not make that mistake again. His thumb moved once over her knuckles. Elena Vale is my mate. I choose her before this council, before my pack, and before every law that exists to protect what is true. The chamber held its breath. Elena could have said many sensible things about timing and public declarations. Instead, she looked at the king who had collapsed in dust to get her attention and said the first true thing. Your wolf is going to be unbearable after this. For 1 second, shock crossed his face. Then Cassian laughed. Not the polite sound of a king in company. A real laugh, warm and startled and entirely his. Several council members looked as if they had witnessed weather indoors. Yes, he said, still holding her hand. He already is. The pack learned by sunset. News moved through Greyhaven in the usual order. Guards first, kitchens second, stables third, then everyone else claiming they had known all along. By nightfall, Elena's clinic was full of flowers, bread, and 1 basket of apples sent by the stablemaster on Valor's behalf. The days that followed were not simple, but they were honest. Aldrin's letters revealed border nobles who had hoped to make Cassian look unstable enough for the council to restrict his authority. Seraphine claimed innocence, but Pike had opinions about that, and Pike's opinions now carried surprising political weight. Cassian shifted more freely, not accidentally, not in panic, but because he wanted to. The first time he shifted in front of the West Guard without tearing a single item of clothing, Marcus stood silently for a full minute, then said, I may weep. Elena continued the treatments, though neither of them pretended the original diagnosis had survived. The liniment remained. Cassian claimed it helped his shoulder. Elena claimed his shoulder was fine. They kept both useful lies. One evening a week after the council hearing, Elena returned to her clinic just as snow began to fall. The town had gone quiet under the first white dusting. Her hearth was lit. Bramble the sheepdog slept near the fire with his splinted leg extended like a wounded hero. The old tomcat occupied the best chair and regarded Elena as staff. She had barely removed her cloak when something heavy scratched at the door. Not knocked. Scratched. Elena closed her eyes. No, she said to the room. The scratch came again, followed by a low, tragic whine. Bramble lifted his head, then decided this was above his rank and went back to sleep. Elena opened the door. The Alpha King's silver wolf sat on her doorstep in the falling snow, one enormous front paw raised. His amber eyes were wide, his ears angled back in noble suffering. Snow gathered on his head, making him look even more dramatic than usual. Elena leaned against the doorframe. Your paw is fine. The wolf held it higher. I examined you this morning. The paw trembled. You chased 3 guards across the North Ridge 2 hours ago. The wolf gave a soft, broken sound. Elena looked past him to where Marcus stood at the garden gate holding a bundle of clothing and wearing the resigned peace of a man who had accepted the shape of his life. Marcus called from the garden gate that the wolf had insisted. Elena reminded him that the patient was a king. Marcus's weary answer carried through the snow with perfect clarity. That fact had not helped. Elena looked back at the wolf. Snowflakes melted on his nose. His expression remained devastating. "Inside," she said at last. The wolf entered with immediate recovery. He crossed the room, inspected Bramble with polite interest, ignored the tomcat's hiss, and collapsed in front of the fire with his supposedly injured paw extended toward her. Elena closed the door and knelt beside him. "This is a relapse." The wolf's tail thumped once. "A serious one?" Another thump. She took the paw in both hands. It was massive, warm, and entirely healthy. "Terrible," she said. "I may need to scratch behind your ears." The wolf's eyes closed in instant agreement. Elena scratched the thick fur behind one ear, then the other. The purr began deep in his chest. Not quite a wolf sound, not quite a man sound, something between contentment and surrender. It filled the little clinic like distant thunder made harmless. After several minutes, the shift moved through him, slow and controlled. Elena turned her head, smiling despite herself. Fabric rustled. When she looked back, Cassian sat on the floor in front of her hearth, dressed in a simple dark shirt and trousers, hair loose, one hand still resting where his wolf's paw had been. He looked absurdly comfortable for a king sitting on a healer's rug. "I may still require treatment," he said. Elena sat back on her heels. "This condition appears permanent." Cassian treated the word permanent with solemn interest, as if she had delivered a grave diagnosis. Elena classified it as chronic. He wanted to know whether it was manageable. She studied him in the firelight. No crown, no counsel, no cloak emergency. Just Cassian, who had spent years holding himself too tightly and was learning, slowly, to breathe. "With regular care," she said. He smiled, and this time there was no embarrassment in it. The old tomcat, having decided that kings were warm and therefore useful, leapt down from the chair and walked directly into Cassian's lap. Cassian froze. Elena raised an eyebrow. "He rarely approves of anyone." The cat circled twice, kneaded Cassian's thigh with unnecessary force, and settled. Cassian understood, with impressive speed, that he was being evaluated. Elena confirmed that he always was. He waited for the verdict. The cat began to purr. Elena smiled. "You passed." Outside, snow softened the town and castle alike. Inside, the clinic smelled of comfrey, warm wool, wood smoke, and the faint, sharp bite of horse liniment. Bramble snored. The cat purred. The Alpha King sat on the floor with one hand around Elena's, his thumb moving slowly over her knuckles as if learning the shape of peace. For a long while, neither of them spoke. They had done enough defending and proving for one day. This was the fire and the snow and two people who no longer needed a false injury to be in the same room. Eventually, Cassian looked toward the door, toward the distant black rise of Greyhaven Castle beyond the town roofs. Cassian eventually admitted he should return before Marcus sent a search party. Elena pointed out that Marcus knew exactly where he was, which was precisely why Cassian believed the beta would wait at least another hour. Elena laughed softly. Cassian's gaze returned to her face, and the warmth in it made her chest ache in a way she did not want healed. "Elena," he said, "when I was young, I thought home was the place where no one could see you fail." She understood too well. Low-born girls learned early to make themselves useful and quiet, to fail only in private, to ask for little and expect less. "And now?" she asked. He looked down at their joined hands. "Now I think it may be the place where you are seen clearly and still allowed to stay." The cat stretched one paw against his sleeve, as if approving the sentiment but not the delivery speed. Elena leaned her shoulder against his. That is a better definition. He turned his head and pressed a kiss to her hair. Gentle, brief, a promise, not a performance. The warmth that moved through her then had nothing to do with healing magic and everything to do with recognition. She had spent her life listening to animals because animals told the truth with their bodies. She had not expected to find a king who needed the same listening. She had not expected to become the person who could hear the fear beneath his control, the loyalty beneath his wolf's ridiculous theater, the home waiting beneath all that stone. At the door, Marcus's voice called through the wood. Your Majesty, I regret to interrupt whatever medical emergency is currently occurring, but the West Tower reports have arrived. Cassian closed his eyes. Elena smiled. The cat did not move. Tell him, Elena called. The patient is stable. Marcus paused outside. That is the first good news I have had in a month. Cassian stood reluctantly, lifting the cat with unexpected care and placing him back in the chair. The cat looked offended by the interruption but permitted it. At the door, Cassian turned back. For one moment, Elena saw both of him. The king who would return to reports, borders, laws, and the hard work of ruling. The wolf who would probably fake another paw injury by Thursday. The man who no longer seemed ashamed of either half. Same time tomorrow? He asked. Elena folded her arms. For treatment? His mouth curved. For whatever this condition requires. Behind him, Marcus made a sound that suggested he was staring at the sky for strength. Elena looked at the man on her doorstep, the snow at his shoulders, the castle beyond him, the little clinic warm behind her. Same time tomorrow, she said. Cassian's eyes flashed gold, not from loss of control, but from joy shared so completely between man and wolf that there was no reason to separate them. He bowed over her hand, not as a king to a subject, but as a man acknowledging the one who had seen him whole. Then he hesitated on the threshold, and his mouth curved with the helpless expression Elena had learned to recognize. The wolf had offered commentary. Cassian informed her, with admirable dignity, that his wolf believed tomorrow's treatment should involve the other paw, a longer ear scratch, and a formal ruling that all future royal emergencies be handled in Elena's clinic. Denied, Elena said. The gold in his eyes brightened. He expected negotiation. He may submit a written appeal. Marcus made a sound from the garden path that suggested he would rather fight 3 traitors than file paperwork for a lovesick wolf. Cassian left laughing softly, and Elena watched until he and Marcus disappeared up the snow-covered road toward Greyhaven. The old tomcat opened one eye. Elena looked at him. Don't start. The cat yawned, stretched, and settled into the chair Cassian had warmed, which was answer enough. Elena laughed under her breath and closed the door. The clinic returned to quiet. Brambles slept. The fire burned low and steady. Beneath council recognition and royal seals, the truth was simple. She had listened. He had stayed. And for the first time in her life, home did not feel like a place she kept for wounded creatures passing through. It felt like something that had chosen to stay with her, too. Thank you for listening. If this story grabbed your heart, hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss our next story. We'll see you in the next one.